that you are confronted with if you are a scientific advisor. Do you act as a true prophet or as a false prophet? I've seen too many examples of false prophets who are completely certain that the world is going actually to an end, and they're actually expecting that. The true prophets don't want the world to go to an end. They want to warn and they want people to change. Now, Björn Lomborg, as you may remember, at the beginning of the century, published his book, The Skeptical Environmentalist, which refers to a litany on the climate change risk. There's also a counter-argument that can be made, that there's actually a litany on what would happen if we would deal with the risk. So in the end, the question for the scientific advisors is, how can we communicate and how can we assess the risks where we are not being an alarmist and also not a denialist on the risks? The session on Wednesday will be in the context also of a larger IPCC reports that have come out where they have tried to assess risks. But this is done at a global level by scientists who have to produce summaries for policymakers, and that's often very difficult to communicate something that's actionable. So this is one of the graphs that came out from that. It didn't make it in the fourth assessment, it did make it in this fifth assessment, the burning amber diagram of the different risks from climate change. We are interested for specific organizations, specific questions, how do you assess and deal with risks and act upon those? This is another portrayal of how you could look at the climate change risk from a security perspective. The larger framework that we will also refer to very briefly is a framework on risk governance. This is the example from the International Risk Governance Council, but that's still quite theoretical. So it has all the things you have seen on graphs before about the different stages in the risk assessment and understanding risks and acting upon risks. What we would like to ask the panelists, and I will introduce them shortly, is 4 very concrete questions, and we want to have examples from them on these questions. So the first one is, how do you actually identify and assess? And we start with disaster risk, but we will broaden it up more to other types of risk as well. As part of your daily work, how do you go about? A second question is, what processes determine in your organization the risks that you prioritize in your analysis? Sometimes there may be all kinds of drivers, for instance, to quantify risks. And why are you going down particular routes? Then there's of course the big question of which risks are more or less uncertain, or which aspects do we think we can know more or less about. So how do you deal with uncertainty, and are there ways you can deal with the deeper uncertainty? But the final question that we will ask is, apparently, I think that will come out, you need more information or other tools to do the risk assessment and also acting upon risk.